We're at kind of an interesting point with electric cars because they're all still relatively in their infancy, and some manufacturers are choosing to go at it alone and others are doing this all with partnerships. Welcome to Out Motorsports, the channel for cars as you are. My name is Jake and I'm here with the 2024 Subaru Solterra, and it's not much of a Subaru and it's been pretty controversial for a lot of reasons. So let's talk about what it is and why it's controversial, and we'll get it out on the road and see if it's any good to drive. So first things first, let's talk partnerships. Obviously Subaru is a smaller brand, and smaller brands, no matter what you make and sell, need to rely on bigger brands and partnerships some of the time to have product and survive, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, Subaru has been partnered up with Toyota for quite some time. Toyota has had a bit of a stake in Subaru for a while, and this is perhaps the recent pinnacle of that partnership. So this, if you've ever looked at a Toyota BZ4X, is the same car. It's the same car more or less down to the styling even. So pretty interesting there. It's also the Lexus RZ450e, which is at least styled somewhat differently. But all three are more or less the same vehicle. Subaru really didn't do a lot as far as development of this car. It's clearly a Toyota, from the key fob to the infotainment system to most of what it is. They put Subaru's MP3 files in for the dash chimes and backup chimes and all that good stuff, but generally this is a BZ4X. Now, Subaru did do a couple things to make it more Subaru-ish just for the sake of packaging. So where you can get a single motor BZ4X, every Solterra is going to be a dual motor model. So that's standard across the board because Subarus are known for all-wheel drive, and you have to use dual motors to get all-wheel drive in an EV like this. So what that means is you've got 215 horsepower, 245 pound-feet of torque. It doesn't sound like a lot. It's not. We'll get into that in the driving portion. But that is what you get, and Subaru gives you X mode drive modes for the sake of off-road use if you're really going to take this somewhere off the beaten path. Now, you're not going to go too far because they come on highway tires, of course. This is not a Solterra Wilderness, although it's got plenty of body cladding to be one. But either way, it's got plenty of ground clearance. It's got 8.3 inches of ground clearance, which is pretty high for an EV. You know, usually you've got a bit of a floor, so they seem to ride high, but it's all a visual trick. It's tomfoolery, and in this case, it's not. So you've got 8.3 inches, which is more than enough for most people doing most things. Now, where some of the controversy comes in with this car, A, is the partnership, the styling. It's to me not a very attractive vehicle, although at least it's got a real name and I like the red paint. But that's one part. Power and torque, not necessarily competitive. It's maybe a little slow, at least on paper. Again, we'll come back to that. But also with the range, the battery size, the DC fast charging, max speed. So you've got a 72.8 kilowatt hour battery in this thing, and that is good for only 222 miles. So not a lot of range. Now, I know a lot of you are going to say, hey, well, people only go 40 miles on average per day and all that. Yes, totally get it. We'll come back to that. The other issue, though, is with the DC fast charging speed. So whereas a lot of other EVs can do 150, 250 kilowatts of DC fast charge speed, which means road trips are really easy, the maximum you'll get out of this is 100 kilowatts, and that is on a perfect day under perfect conditions. Subaru did improve some battery management for the sake of charging and battery use for 2024 on the Solterra. The 2023s had a little bit different software, but still just not necessarily punching at the top of the class here with what this car is as a package. And then all of that comes together with the price. So this one is a Solterra Touring, which is the top trim. There are no options available. This is just fully loaded. This is $54,000, and that's a lot of money. Now, you do qualify sort of kind of for the $7,500 tax credit, but you have to lease the car, which a lot of manufacturers are doing. These are made in Japan, so unless you've got enough of the vehicle or the whole vehicle made here in the US, you're not going to qualify for that credit. Now, these do start around 44 grand, but this is the most expensive vehicle in the Subaru lineup by MSRP, and I don't know if it's super compelling on paper, but there's plenty to talk about for how it drives, so let's get behind the wheel. It's 92 degrees out, so I'd like to get the air conditioning here, and we'll talk about how it drives and see if it can redeem itself a little bit. So a couple things before we start driving with the interior. This is all the exact same as the BZ4X, which is just kind of what you're going to get. A few interesting little quirks here. First thing being the shifter. So this is a rotary dial shifter, which is pretty common across certain makes and models. We've seen it with, you know, Stellantis products and Fords and things in the past, but you don't twist the whole dial, you actually twist the outer ring. So you push down and turn. So just interesting. It's easy enough to use. All the controls are easy enough to use. The climate control has dedicated hard buttons, but they're all touch, which don't love that. There are buttons for your temperature, your fan speed, and your air control for where it directs the air, which is fine. The volume controls, you don't have a knob anywhere. And I know this sounds persnickety, but there's buttons you push below the screen, or there's a toggle on the steering wheel. And I don't really like that. I would prefer to have a knob somewhere, but that's that. This car does have a wireless charger inside this little compartment, so that's a nice touch, although I think wireless chargers are kind of useless because they just get your phone really hot. But in any case, that is there. And then you don't have a glove box. So you've got this kind of styrofoamy feeling material on the dashboard, but down here, this is just going to be a piece of plastic. And then the other thing is with the steering wheel gauge cluster relationship going on. So it's very interesting, it's very odd looking. You've got a really long steering column and you've got this screen that looks like it's kind of way out and blocked by the wheel. The wheel itself is kind of a square and it's actually pretty good. So while you're on the move, the screen is almost positioned where a heads-up display would be, which I really, really like actually, and the steering wheel comes out and is lower, so nothing is in the way of anything. And as a bonus, this does not always happen for me in Toyotas and other Japanese cars sometimes, but I fit really well in this as a 6'1" human. So this is all actually really well thought out, despite looking kind of funky. So that's enough of that. Let's twist this, put it in drive, get moving. So right off the bat, power-wise, I know I said it's only 215 horsepower. It doesn't sound like a lot, and it's not. You know, competitors offer more, but one thing that I just find interesting is, despite this being heavy, you know, every EV is heavy, the way they've got it geared, the amount of torque it produces, everything is plenty enough. It is not fast, but you'll be doing 70 on the interstate before you know it. It's really kind of interesting in that, you know, I thought this would feel slower than it is, or than it does, and I've been really surprisingly okay with the horsepower output. Now, again, for the price, everything comes back to for the price, which for the price I would hope for more than 215 horsepower. That's the thing. Now, it just beeped. It said driver inattention detected, look forward. There is a little strip of sensors here above the steering wheel, and this Solterra yells at you a lot. It wants you to be paying very close attention to your driving, which frankly we all should be, but the issue, it just said sit up, driver's face not detected. It says sit up, like a, you know, if your mom is watching you slouch in your kitchen chair or something. These cameras want to see you all the time, and that's okay if you're holding the wheel at 10 and 2, 9 and 3. If every so often you want to just, you know, be casual, talk to a friend, whatever, and you end up holding the wheel at the top of the steering wheel, you block the cameras and then it yells at you. And I don't like that because now the car is in my way. I think good technology gets out of the way of the person using it. So just kind of bugs me. I know they have to be a certain distance from you to really see clearly and have all this work. And again, all this driver assistance tech is in its infancy too, just like EVs. You know, I know we've had this all around, but it's been it's all just early. So hopefully there will be a time when these can be relocated and you know, you can hold the steering wheel however you want, but that's just something that's kind of bugged me. Now, as we're moving here, I've been driving this primarily in a city environment, did get some good highway time with it. Around town, I think the suspension is really well damped. It rides nicely. It's properly firm, so it's not going to fall on its face as the road gets a little windy, but it's not so harsh that it's irritating. And this is not a performance car. Subaru's not saying it's a performance car. You know, this is not a Solterra WRX or Solterra TS or whatever you want to call it now. But it feels pretty composed suspension-wise, and the brakes also feel really nice. So this car has a form of one-pedal drive. There is a button here that you can push on the console, but it's not a ton of regenerative braking to where it will actually bring the car to a complete stop. You'll still need the pedal. And, you know, you can use it however you want. They added paddles to the steering wheel this year, so you can change how much regen you want, but you're still gonna have to use the brake pedal. Now, the good thing is the brake pedal feel is really good. They've done a nice job blending the regen brakes and the regular brakes, and the pedal feel is nice the whole time. So good initial bite, good feel as you push it if you need to stop a little harder. So that in itself is really pleasant, because, you know, it's not easy to blend those brakes. Now, on the topic of brakes and, honestly, suspension and handling and all of this, we have to talk about the tires, especially under braking. I've had a couple moments. DC traffic is DC traffic, especially on the DC Beltway. If any of you have been on the Beltway, it's just awful sometimes. If you have to do a heavier stop, let's say, a little panic stop, it is pretty easy to get some noise out of the tires. They are a low grip tire. A lot of people have complained about them as far as other reviews are concerned, and they're just not ideal. And that extends to braking and handling and everything. They ride fine, but they're clearly picked for, you know, as low of noise as possible, and range and life and all that, and grip is just the last priority that they had on that list. So, okay, the tires kind of impact things. The tires could be better, but how is the steering with all this? Obviously, again, they're not saying it's a sports car, but the steering, I think, is pretty decent for what it is. It's appropriately weighted. It's got a little bit of feel to it. You know where the front tires are pointed, which is at least a start. The last WRX I drove, I thought, had the opposite issue, where you had a ton of grip, but you didn't really have a ton of feedback from the steering rack. In this case, I think it's the opposite, where you've got some feedback. You can throw it into an off-ramp and, you know, however hard you want to chuck a Solterra, but either way, you can do it, and it will tell you where the front wheels are pointed. It's just more, you run out of grip earlier. So it's kind of the opposite there. So driving experience wise, generally fairly pleasant. The other thing, as far as highway is concerned, this is all fairly quiet at city speeds around town in the suburbs. But when you get out on the highway, there is a bit of wind and tire noise. It's not excessive, but again, everything that I'm feeling about the Solterra comes back to for the money. And for $54,000, I would like it to be a little quieter on top of all the other things I mentioned. And we'll come back to range here too, because I know that the average statistic is that you drive 40 miles a day, but, you know, this thing blows through battery. It's being relatively efficient in that it's averaging over 3 miles per kilowatt hour in my driving, which is mostly city. But why are you beeping? Stop beeping. But either way, the only way this feels like it would make sense is if you don't really road trip it much, and if you have a charger at home. And every EV makes the most sense if you have a charger at home, because you can start every day with, you know, 80%, 90%, whatever you want to do. But if you drive distance, there's just not a lot of buffer, because you have to keep in mind whatever the rated range is. In this case, 222. If you get the lower trim, the base trim, it's 227, but you call it 225, split the difference. That is on a perfect day. If you're driving in the winter when it's really cold, your range drops. You know, you're driving 85 miles an hour, your range drops. So, you know, even if you're not going super far, I understand the 40-mile thing, but also, you know, you also want to have a buffer if you're road tripping. So this is just not a car that would be great for the sake of that, combined with that slow 100 kilowatt perfect world DC fast charge speed. We are beyond that now. So this just feels a little bit, you know, I don't want to say phoned in, because it's not. There's parts of it that are pretty good, but, you know, this is a Toyota EV, and Toyota in particular has not been the most enthusiastic about going full EV with all of their models. I think they're really trying to play it conservative, play it safe, and do a mix, as they've stated, of plug-ins and regular hybrids, and, you know, they say they're committed to EVs as well. I think if you're committed to EVs, this is not reflecting that. And you know, Subaru knows they need to have some skin in the EV game. They know they need to be doing this, but this doesn't feel very Subaru to me either. This doesn't fit the brand's vibe to me, and, you know, good for them that they have it. good for them that it's a real name, but you know, I think what people are looking for is an electric Forester or an electric Outback, and this doesn't have the same like charm and spirit that those cars do, or even an electric Crosstrek, if you will. This is different, and you know, it's okay in some ways, and it's uncompetitive in some others, but it just doesn't feel very Subaru-y to me. And I think that's my single biggest hang-up with it, more than the range, more than the charge speed. The price is kind of a hang-up here. I know right now they've got a ton of lease deals. If you're watching this relatively close to when I filmed in July of 2024, the lease deals on these and the Toyotas are pretty insane because they're trying to move them. But yeah, I like it more than I thought I would. I expected to come into this knowing it's uncompetitive and just kind of hating it, and I don't hate it. I think for the right buyer, it actually is fine. If you're a Subaru loyalist and you just want an electric Subaru, I think it's fine. But if you're willing to cross shop and look at other brands, when you get to $50,000 or even, you know, mid 40s for a lower trim of this, you've just got options, and some of them are just more well executed than this for the sake of basic drivability, namely if you're going to take them out, you know, on a long trip. We've got one little on-ramp here, so I'll go ahead and just pin it. Like, it's torquey. The 245 pound-feet, torquey. The gearing really helps it out. So it feels quicker than it is, and, you know, I'm good with that. You get above about 60, it starts to feel a little slower, but it's still not, you know, nothing to complain about. So that's been like the single biggest surprise. And overall, I like this more than I thought I would. I think I came into it expecting to be a little more let down because a lot of the reviews I've consumed about the Solterra have been not super favorable. And I do think for the right buyer, this is okay. I do think for you know, a Subaru loyalist that just wants an electric Subaru, this might make sense. Again, for the money, if you're willing to cross shop, that's where this gets a little tricky for me, because when you get to $50,000 for an EV, you have options, and there are just others that are more cohesive as a whole package. So that's my thoughts on the 2024 Subaru Solterra. Thank you so much for coming along. As always, please be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe right here on YouTube. Give us a follow on Facebook, Instagram, and maybe even Twitter at Out Motorsports. Head over to outmotorsports.com if you want to join a community of LGBT automotive enthusiasts and motorsports competitors. We got plenty of events going on, both on the racetrack and on the street throughout the rest of this calendar year, and we'd love to have you be one of our new best friends. So, till next time, please stay safe, be well. See you for the next one.